Hi, this is Courtney. Today we're going to be talking about autism. According to statistics from the Center for Disease Control, nearly 1 in 54 children born today have or eventually will have autism. This is from autismspeaks.org, a wonderful website for any other information you may need. And sadly, when you or your child gets the diagnosis of autism, it is a scary time. And normally, doctors focus on just the negative aspects of autism, which tend to make things worse or more scary. So, today we're going to be talking about the negative side of autism, the amazing and positive side of autism, and how autism is different from person to person. It's a spectrum after all. So first, let's get the negative out of the way, part that nobody wants to hear. It's the part everybody dreads. Talk about it, good information to know, but it's hard to hear. So we're going to go ahead and get that out of the way. First things first, bite the bullet, get it out of the way. So the first thing is that those on autism spectrum, they struggle with social interaction, behavior issues, and sensory issues. So when most people hear autism, they think of kids with some seemingly strange behavior patterns, or they do self-injury, or they're aggressive. But it's not the case with everything. We'll get into that later. Sorry, jumping ahead of myself. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is big behavior signs. So it makes it to where the child can have restricted and repetitive behaviors. And this can be seen in various ways. So my son, for instance, he has to have the same meal every day for lunch at school. He has to take a Lunchable to school with him, or else he just won't eat. Today, for instance, he dropped his Lunchable on the ground, and the faculty got him a tray, but he wouldn't eat it. So they need that repetitive in their life. Repetition is key for success with them. This can also be seen as an aversion to transitioning with the repetition. Some kids just have a meltdown if their daily activity just its way. It's like, say they were supposed to have PE at 1 o'clock right after they got back from lunch on Tuesday, but the PE teacher was gone and they didn't have anybody to cover for her, so she wasn't there today. So we're not having PE today. For a neurotypical kid, this wouldn't be an issue, but for someone with autism that is used to every Tuesday after lunch, we go to PE. This is a very panicky thing for them. It's hard for them to understand and accept. So another behavior is stimming. And this can be like flapping or doing this, or moving your hair or bouncing or spinning, anything like that is stimming. This is regulating their sensory needs, and they can spin wheels, shake sticks, flip levers, just anything for repetitive motion. This is a stimming behavior that is very common for people and children with autism. So, another thing is the ability to understand and comprehend emotions. This is a hard one for a lot of people, too. So, they struggle with showing emotions. They may not know how to show them correctly. They may not show them at all. They don't understand most emotions. Um, so instead of, like, if I was upset, I would say, man, this is really upsetting me. An autistic child not knowing how to vocalize that might have a meltdown. And that's just because they don't understand how to voice their emotions, or if this upsets me, I'm going to remove myself from the situation. They don't know how to regulate their emotions in that way. So this causes meltdowns. And that's why sometimes you hear some kids screaming in the grocery store. They they're overwhelmed, they don't understand, or they're upset about something, they don't know how to vocalize it correctly. So, a meltdown. The next one is it takes longer for them to recognize emotions. So, this is a quote from Raising Children, in the article is called Emotional Development in Autistic Children. It says by 5 to 7 years, many autistic children can recognize happy and sad, but they have a harder time with subtle expressions of fear and anger. My adolescents, autistic teenagers still aren't as good as recognizing fear, anger, surprise, and disgust as typically developing teenagers. As adults, many continue to have trouble recognizing some emotions. So this is something that some can struggle with for their entire lives. So the next behavioral issue is self-injury and aggression. This is, in my opinion, some of the hardest behaviors for especially your heart as a parent to have to deal with. Self-injury can include slapping, scratching, headbanging, biting, pinching, and any other behavior that causes physical harm. That's from the Autism Research Institute. So many times, like I said, they may not know how to communicate and regulate their emotions. So if they're mad, they're going to bang their head against a wall, a bed, the floor, whatever they can get to, or something's hurting their arm, so they're just going to pinch it. They don't know how to properly express that. So that's where this comes in, and the only way to really help with this behavior is to seek behavioral therapy. And it can be a struggle and it can take a long time, but there's always hope. So the next trying thing of autism is the social aspect. Spoken language, conversation, eye contact, and personal space. All of these are struggles for a person with autism. According to autismspeaks.org, an estimated 40% of people with autism are nonverbal. Spoken language and conversation do not come easily for those with autism. And most do not understand the social cues that come along with holding a normal conversation. Eye contact is extremely hard for those with autism. Holding on to eye contact while having a conversation can cause them stress or makes them physically uncomfortable. It can make you feel like just pain. I personally have a problem with eye contact myself. And sometimes it makes you feel just like it can hurt. And I know I'm supposed to look at you, so I'm going to look at you. But That's a learned behavior. So, yes, you can learn it, and eventually it won't hurt as much, or it won't cause you as much physical anxiety. You won't get the tingling sensation in your fingers or just the whole anxious feeling taking over your body. It can be a learned behavior and fixed with behavior therapy as well. So, personal space, the next one, is something that some people with autism do not understand. So, they can either invade your space or be very protective of your personal space. Some people can be both, like my son. So, my son, he will come up to you and he'll get this close to you and he'll be like, hey, do you want to go play outside? And he won't realize that he is way too close to you. And that's an autism thing. And, excuse me, another one is like with him, he doesn't like people touching his head. So if somebody even just ruffles his hair like people normally do with boys, sends him into a panic, sometimes he'll cry. That's his personal space, don't touch him. Um, he will hug people. He hugged people backwards for the longest time. So, I mean, it's just a personal space. So you can either way too much, way too little. When he first was diagnosed, he also didn't understand that you weren't supposed to touch people's butts. So he would just go and touch people. He didn't understand. We kept having to explain this is why you can't do that. Autistic children want to know the why. At least my son, he needs to know why this isn't an acceptable behavior, why we don't do this, why we do that. He needs to know. And that's just a thing that comes along with it. So my son, he has, in the 2 years since he's been diagnosed, changed so much with that. He will now hug people forward facing. He still cries if you touch his head. Some people can now, but most people cannot. He's been doing occupational therapy, and he's a wonderful teacher this year who's been very helpful with him and his autism and everything. So, therapy, love, it works, let me tell you. So, the next main negative of autism I would like to talk about is sensory issues. So there's hypersensitivity, which is where you over-respond to stimuluses such as sight, sound, touch, smell, taste. People with autism that experience hypersensitivity in these stimuli may get overwhelmed when they're put in a situation with these and they have to deal with them. Talk about my son again. He cannot handle loud noises. He has to wear headphones for fireworks. We go to a parade and there's fire trucks. Anything that it is loud. Sometimes if a truck's exhaust is too loud, he will just cover his ears and curl up into a ball. It's crazy. He doesn't like textures or smells of certain food to the point that he will gag and sometimes even throw up if it gets too bad. The next one is hyposensitivity, which is an under response to stimuli. An example of that is low sensitivity to pain or body signals that help balance and physical coordination, which can result in clumsiness. That comes from Autism Speaks. People can experience both hyper and hyposensitivity at the same time. So you can not have the body awareness and be sensitive to light, sound. It's different from person to person. So Finally, we're done with all the negatives. We can finally get to the good part, the amazing part of autism. I know that it was very in depth, all that negative information, but it's very important to be knowledgeable about the subject. So let's move on and focus on the positives. Now, I do want to say this doesn't mean that you should wish that you have this by any means. I just want more people to focus on not just the negatives. Highlight some of the positives too, especially when somebody's first being diagnosed. It's so scary to hear all those negative parts. Say some positives too. So, those on the spectrum have such an amazing brain. Their gifts show in different ways. Some can be very knowledgeable, they can communicate differently, and are very gifted. Autistic brains are just wired differently. They see things in a different way than we do, and it's just really amazing to see. They observe and retain facts differently. They have a long-term memory that is excellent and have superior recall. This information comes from The Positives of Autism, written by Benny. So, my son, at 5 years old, could tell you turn by turn how to get to his aunt's house, and she lives 10 minutes away from here. He just has that long term memory retention that is just crazy amazing, let me tell you. And that's just one of the gifts that some of these people get. Different from person to person. So the next one is analytical brains. They can spot patterns, have a I can't say that word, methodical approach to have a methodical approach that makes them approach things in a different way. And this makes them better at or have great skill in science, math, and music. This also comes from Benny, The Positives of Attitude. It can make them very deep and thoughtful. And if they can speak, let me tell you, it makes for some interesting dinner conversations, such as when my son was 4, he was asking, what are atoms? And he wants you to know. You can't just say, I don't know. He says, yes, you do. You know. He expects you to know everything. So if you don't know, you better get your Google, because he will want the answer. They just thrive off that information and facts, and they just want to know everything. He craves knowledge. He does. So communication is different, obviously, with those with autism. They speak and act differently than others, and it's honestly really amazing to see. Um, just my son, he had a really hard time speaking, and he talks normal now. He graduated from speech. It's crazy to see the growth that can happen. The next one is emotions. Even though these can be hard for some, others can tune into emotions and be the most kind and loving people you will ever meet. And my son, I know I'm talking about him a lot, but man, he may not understand emotions fully or how to control them, but he knows when I'm sad or when I'm happy. And when I'm sad, he will do anything to make me happy again. Even if that's just laying on the couch with me, cuddling, or when his dad was gone, he made sure that he slept with me every single night. And I thought it was just because he wanted to be with me. He didn't want me to be alone. He told me that later. That communication, they show their emotions and love in a different way. You have to be able to interpret it. Most with autism do not understand sarcasm whatsoever. They don't see a point in lying, so they will be some of the most honest people that you have ever met. And let me tell you, that can make for some funny conversations. You definitely have to be on your toes with it. They're honest. So, due to some of the reasons above, such as thinking differently, observing everything around them, their relationships, their emotion helps some of those with autism have high creativity. Because a lot of people with autism are visual learners, this can help them be more creative and detail focused. Due to their love of repetition and analytical brains, some with autism may have a real knack for music and art. So, autism doesn't have to be so scary. Knowing that there can be some positives, at least, that come along with it they have such unique brains. And honestly, I'm still learning every day about my son and his unique and wonderful brain. And not everyone with autism is the same. So, next we're going to be talking about the different levels of autism. So, according to autismspeaks.org, there are three main severity levels for autism spectrum disorder. So, not every diagnosing doctor will give you or your child's level. My son's doctor didn't give him a specific level when he was diagnosed. They're broken up into level 1, 2, and 3. And this is pretty much word for word what the website says from Autism Speaks, Autism Diagnosis Criteria, DSM-5. So level 1 is requiring support. Without this support, problems in social communication cause noticeable impairments. Difficulty initiating social interactions may have decreased interest in social interactions, etc. A person who speaks in full sentences but struggles with back and forth communication. Level 2 is requiring substantial support, marked deficiencies in verbal and nonverbal and social communication skills. They have limited initiation of social interactions and reduced or abnormal responses to social conversations of others. A person who speaks in simple sentences, whose interaction is limited to narrow or special interests, and has nonverbal communication. And level 3, which is requiring very substantial support, severe deficits in verbal and nonverbal social communication skills, and cause severe impairments in functioning, very limited initiation of social interactions, and minimal response to social conversations of others. A person with a few to no words of speech who rarely initiates interactions, and when he or she does, responds to only very few social approaches. So those are the three levels. Level 3 being the highest, obviously, and level 1 being the lowest. That would be high functioning, would be level 1. So hearing all these can be super scary. And no one wants to be broken down into 3 categories based on your behavior and communication skills. I have stumbled over how many words? So it's important to remember that it's not just the negatives that in autism. We have to focus on the positives. It's so important. There's so much more that goes into the spectrum, and this was just the very top of it. So, we heard a lot of good information here. learned about autism, what it really is, talked about the negative aspects of autism, the positive aspects of autism, and how autism is a spectrum. I hope that you have learned from this, and that if you're ever in the position where your family member, your child, or someone you know is being diagnosed with autism, you feel like you have some knowledge, and it may not seem so scary for yourself or for them. You can support them in this. The most important part of this is caring and loving someone with autism is just always be their advocate. They're always going to need someone in their corner, no matter what. No matter what their level is on the spectrum, no matter if they're high functioning, low functioning, whatever. Love them, support them, never give up on them.